Hello everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Crime Scene channel. Please like, share, and subscribe for this channel to stay tuned for the videos. In today's video, we will explore the case of Martin Andreas, who went to the mall to pick up some things for his mother. As he was walking towards the mall, a small blue van driven by an elderly man pulled up, and he rolled down his window.
He rolled down his window and he said, "I'm in trouble. I need help. I have to move some furniture for my brother and I can't do it by myself. Could you help me? I'll give you a few dollars."
Today, we delve into the harrowing story of 13-year-old Paul Martin Andrews, kidnapped, assaulted, and confined inside an underground box for 8 agonizing days. Miraculously, he managed to escape. Once free, Paul took it upon himself to do everything in his power to prevent Richard Osley from terrorizing another young boy. However, little did he know that the journey to ensure justice would be far more challenging than he could have ever anticipated. In the small town of Portsmouth, Virginia, we meet 13-year-old Paul Martin Andrews, who has recently moved to the area with his family, along with his younger sister, Jennifer. The date is January 11, 1973, and the town is draped in a blanket of snow. Undeterred by the cold weather, Martin sets out on a brief trip to a local convenience store, just 2 blocks away from his home. His mission: to purchase some milk for himself and his sister. But Jennifer starts to worry when Martin doesn't return home.
"It's my fault. I sent him out for milk. It was the longest night of my childhood, thinking that he wasn't gonna come back."
Sign of Martin, his family calls the police. The authorities initiate a search, and a local fireman joins the effort using a helicopter, but no trace of him is found. January 12th arrives. A day passes with still no leads. Martin's family anxiously awaits as one day turns into 2, then 3. They fear the worst has happened, that Martin has died. Worrying he might have drowned, the Coast Guard drags a local waterway looking for Martin's body, but nothing comes up. 1 full week has passed since Martin disappeared, and people are starting to lose hope. 8 days of torture for the family. January 19, 1973. Brings a glimmer of hope. Deep in the woods, hunters come up a hill and discover a door in the ground. They open it and find little Martin chained inside the box. Martin's mother is at work when she gets the call. She doesn't know if he is dead or alive. He has just arrived at the hospital with the police. Martin is badly beaten with 2 black eyes and a broken nose, but he's alive. Martin and his family are finally reunited, but his abductor is still on the loose, nowhere to be found. The police bring Martin suspect photos, and he quickly identifies his abductor, Richard Osley. The police look into Osley and learn that he is one of Virginia's most notorious child molesters. He's been convicted of kidnapping and sexually assaulting minors many times before. The very same day Osley kidnapped Martin, he skipped his court appearance for abducting Buck. He was out on bail for raping another child and was forced to live with his father, who lived just down the street from where his mother lives. As police and FBI scramble to find Osley before he takes another victim, Martin returns home, but his sister sees that his nightmare isn't over yet.
"When I saw his face, he turned and looked at me, and that's when the nightmare came true. His eyes were empty, he wasn't there. My strong older brother was somebody else."
The quest for Osley spans into the neighboring North Carolina until, ultimately, on the 4th day of the search, at 2:30 a.m., the FBI receives a phone call from Osley's father. Osley has returned home. Moving swiftly, the FBI arrests Osley on September 27, 1973. 13-year-old Martin is set to testify against his abductor in court. The trial marks the first occasion Martin speaks about the harrowing events he endured in the confinement. The prosecution expresses concern about Martin having to revisit the trauma during the trial.
One of my biggest concerns was that he was just a young fellow, 13 years of age, and had been horribly abused by Osley. And to have to put him on the stand to testify as to what happened to him concerned me greatly.
I remember seeing Richard Osley over to the side. I remember him staring at me. His eyes never really left me.
Despite Osley's unwavering gaze fixed on him throughout, Martin recounts to the police the events of the day of his abduction. His narrative commences on a snowy day when he decides to walk up to the convenience store. While on foot, a blue minivan pulls up beside him, and Richard Osley rolls down the window. Osley, looking troubled, utters, "I'm in trouble. I need help. I have to move some furniture for my brother, and I can't do it by myself. Could you help me? I'll give you a few dollars." Unaware of the predator within his small community, Martin agrees, and they drive off together. Osley takes Martin 20 miles away from his home into a forest. His apprehension began to intensify regarding the duration of this journey. He started questioning Osley, asking, "Where are we going?" Osley repeatedly assured him, saying, "Oh, don't worry, it's not much for there, just up the road." Osley stops the van in the middle of the snow-covered woods and exits. He informs Martin that they need to take some supplies to his brother's steer box. Martin observes Osley returning to the van, rummaging around, and pulling out a large butcher knife, concealing it within his jacket. At that moment, every alarm in Martin's mind is ringing, yet he continues to follow Osley down the path. They reach a clearing, and Osley points to mounds of dirt, stating, "His stair box is over there. There is a piece of metal, resembling a pan." Then he grabs hold of it and lifts it up. Osley reveals a box hidden in the ground. Even from the opening, you could see some sleeping bags, and there's a blue plastic sheet covering the floor. Osley jumps down into the box and instructs Martin to do the same. As he lowers himself into the box, Osley drops a bombshell, saying, "I've got bad news for you. You've just been kidnapped." Martin's blood runs cold. He is consumed with the instinct to flee and get out of there. He starts fighting to escape, and they engage in a struggle. Martin's primary thought is to get his hands on that knife, reaching for it as they wrestle. In the midst of reaching for the knife, he manages to land a hit to Osley's face. At that point, Osley stops fighting, having gained control over him. Osley binds Martin's hands and feet, securing a chain around his ankle to prevent any escape. What happens next may be disturbing to some people. Almost immediately, Osley instructs him to strip out of his clothes, forewarning him that he won't like what's about to happen. He proceeds to assault Martin, always brutal, always with the menacing presence of that knife, and a constant threat of death if he doesn't comply. The knife becomes the haunting element for Martin, as it was used to intimidate him throughout, and it's what kept him from attempting to escape. However, Osley remains with Martin in the box, holding him hostage for days until Martin perceives a change in Osley. Osley seems to be working himself up to the point of killing him, but Martin senses uncertainty. It appears Osley never planned for the end game, and is now stuck with Martin, realizing that killing the boy will result in even more years in prison. Unable to bring himself to kill Martin just yet, Osley viciously attacks him. Just as Martin thinks Osley is leaving, Osley kneels over him, making eye contact, and begins to beat him with his fist. Back and forth, punches land, and Osley yells at him, leaving Martin with 2 black eyes, a cracked tooth, and a broken nose. His injuries severe. As Martin lies in the box at night, he knows his time is running out. Thoughts of what his mother is going through weigh heavily on his mind. What was going through his mother's mind? Would she be worried? Would she be crying? He thinks that bothered him more than anything, that his mother would be crying about him. You know, that he was gone, and never to know what happened to him. It wasn't so much about going home. It was about staying alive. On January 19, 1973, the 8th day of Martin's captivity, Usley makes a mistake that will change the course of this case forever. He leaves Martin alone in the box at 8 o'clock. For the first time, Martin hears something outside as he sits there, hoping that his mom would come soon to pick him up. He hears the sound of gears shifting and thinks, that's gotta be his mom. With his leg chained behind him, he can just stretch out enough to open up the top of the box and get the top of his head out. And his sight wasn't his mom, but these two trucks coming through the woods. He started screaming at them, shouting, please stop, please stop. They walked over to where he was and looked in the hole. He said, I have been kidnapped. Hunters find Martin beaten and chained inside the box. For one of the hunters, the sight of 13-year-old Martin is too much to handle, and he has to step away. The police are called. The police arrive and decide to take pictures while he is still chained in the box. Those pictures vividly capture the brutality of what transpired there. The police free Martin, place him in a patrol car, and rush him to the hospital, where he is finally reunited with his mother because of Martin's testimony. Usley is sentenced to more than 40 years in prison, but there's a possibility of his release after serving his time, raising concerns about the potential harm he could cause to another child. Despite bravely coming forward, Martin believes he's finally done with his nightmare. However, the circumstances of his abduction are so shocking that a professional psychiatrist calls Martin a liar and recommends institutionalization, disbelieving his story. The psychiatrist advises Martin's parents not to let him talk about his experience, suggesting that suppressing it will make it go away. Over time, everyone forgets about it except for Martin. He never discusses the traumatic events with anyone again, leading to a deep depression. Keeping his secret takes a toll on his well-being. His spouse and friends, unaware of this part of his life, contribute to the internal turmoil. Despite appearances, Martin's inner world is being torn apart. In June 2002, 30 years later, Martin believes he has moved on when he receives a call he never expected. While at work, his mom informs him that Richard Usley is about to be released. The news horrifies Martin, as he had assumed this man, who had inflicted such terrible things upon him, would be in prison for life. Uncertain about what to do, Martin discovers that Usley is set to be released. Usley attempts to convince everyone that he's a changed man in order to secure his release. Despite serving 30 years in prison for kidnapping Martin Andrews, Usley claims he fights the temptation daily and warns others about the dangers of sexual predators. He expresses remorse and insists he would never harm another child. Although Martin hadn't spoken about Usley's actions in 30 years, he decides to come forward to prevent another child from suffering. Martin emails delegates, senators, the Attorney General, and the parole board to ensure Usley remains in prison. Usley fights back, offering to spend the rest of his life in prison, or be Martin's personal slave. Martin asserts that he just wants to ensure Usley doesn't harm another child. Speaking out inspires another victim, Buck Miller, to come forward, and later, Gary Founds, who never reported his assault in 1972, speaks out after 30 years. Martin's efforts lead to additional charges against Usley, extending his prison time. However, Usley dies suddenly in prison in January 2004. Despite Usley's attempts to play the victim, Martin emerges as a true survivor. Martin, once a 13-year-old trapped in a box, finds healing by speaking out. He becomes a loving husband, strengthens his family bonds, and dedicates himself to advocating for survivors and passing laws to protect victims of sexual violence. Martin emphasizes the importance of talking about abuse to heal the pain and prevent abusers from escaping justice. Dear Marin, your strength, resilience, and advocacy are truly inspiring. Your courage in speaking out against injustice has made a profound impact. Thank you for turning your pain into a force for positive change. You are a beacon of hope for survivors everywhere. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for this channel, and let me know your opinion.